The thunder croaked so loud it seemed to split the sky in two, and Amelia Jarrett ran through the muddy streets of Parowan, Utah, with her dress soaked through and her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. It was August 1878, and the storm had rolled in from the mountains with a vengeance that matched the fury building in her chest. Behind her, she could hear her father's voice bellowing through the downpour, calling her name with that particular edge that meant his patience had worn through. Her brothers would be with him, she knew, spreading out through the streets to find her and drag her back to that suffocating house where they had already planned out every moment of her future without once asking what she wanted. They had told her that morning, told her, not asked. She was to marry Edmund Crowley, a man 40 years her senior with two dead wives already in the ground and a reputation for cruelty that made even the hardest men in town look away when his name was mentioned. Her father owed him money, a gambling debt that had grown too large to ignore, and Amelia, at 19 years old, was the payment he had agreed upon. She stumbled through an alley between the general store and the blacksmith shop, her boots sliding in the mud. The rain was coming down so hard she could barely see 3 feet in front of her face, but she kept running because stopping meant going back, and going back meant a life that would slowly kill everything inside her that still hoped for something better. When she burst out onto the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land, she nearly collided with a horse. The animal reared back slightly, and strong hands steadied it with practiced ease. Through the sheets of rain, Amelia looked up into the face of a man she had seen around town but never spoken to. Isaac Emerson was 24 years old, a ranch hand who worked the cattle drives that came through the territory. He had dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain and eyes that assessed the situation in an instant. He saw her soaked dress, her terrified expression, the way she kept glancing back toward town. He heard the men's voices calling in the distance, getting closer. "Please," Amelia gasped, and that single word carried everything she could not say. Isaac did not hesitate. He swung down from his horse in one fluid motion and pressed the reins into her hands. "Ride fast now," he said, his voice cutting through the storm with quiet urgency. "Head northeast, toward the canyon pass. There's a line shack about 10 miles out. You will see it near a stand of cottonwoods. Wait for me there." "But your horse," she started to protest, even as her hands closed around the leather reins like a lifeline. "I will get another. Go now." He gave her a boost up into the saddle, his hands steady and sure. "They are coming." Amelia looked down at him for just a moment. This stranger who was giving up his horse for her without question, without knowing anything about her situation except that she needed help. The rain ran down both their faces like tears. Then she dug her heels into the horse's sides and took off into the storm. The ride was treacherous. The ground was slick with mud and the visibility was almost nothing, but the horse seemed to sense her desperation and ran with sure-footed determination. Behind her, the voices faded into the roar of the storm. Amelia leaned low over the horse's neck, her hands tangled in its mane, and let herself hope for the first time that day that escape might actually be possible. She found the line shack exactly where Isaac had said it would be, a small, rough structure nestled against a rocky outcrop with the cottonwoods standing like sentinels nearby. By the time she reached it, the storm was beginning to ease slightly, though the rain still fell in steady sheets. She dismounted clumsily, her legs shaking from fear and exertion, and led the horse under the small overhang that served as shelter. Inside, the shack was sparse but dry. There was a small stove, a rough wooden bunk, a table with 2 chairs, and some basic supplies. Amelia stood in the middle of the single room and felt the reality of what she had done wash over her. She had run. She had actually run. Her father would be furious, her brothers would tear the town apart looking for her, and Edmund Crowley would want revenge for the insult to his pride. But she was free. At least for this moment, she was free. She did not know how long she stood there dripping water onto the wooden floor before she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Her heart seized with panic until she recognized Isaac's silhouette through the window. He was riding a different horse, a paint mare that looked as tired as Amelia felt. Isaac came inside, shaking water from his hat and coat. Up close, in the dim light filtering through the window, Amelia could see him more clearly. He was tall and lean with the kind of strength that came from hard work rather than bulk. His face was weathered by sun and wind, honest and open, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often despite the hardness of his life. "You made it," he said simply, and there was relief in his voice. "You gave me your horse," Amelia replied, still trying to understand why a stranger would do such a thing. "You did not even know why I was running." "Didn't need to know, saw enough." Isaac moved to the stove and began building a fire with practiced efficiency. Saw a woman running like her life depended on it. Saw men chasing her with that look. That was enough. "My father," Amelia said quietly, "my father and brothers. They want me to marry a man I do not want. A terrible man." Isaac's hands paused briefly in their work, then continued. "Edmund Crowley," he said, and it was not a question. "You know him. Everyone knows him, and everyone knows what kind of man he is." The fire caught, and Isaac added more kindling carefully. "No woman should be forced into that. No woman should be forced into anything." The simple certainty in his voice made something tight in Amelia's chest loosen slightly. She had spent so long being told that she had no choice, that her duty was to obey, that her wants did not matter. Hearing someone state the opposite so plainly was like oxygen after drowning. "They will come looking for me," Amelia said. "My father owes Crowley money. I'm the payment." Isaac's jaw tightened. "You are not property to be traded." "Tell that to my father." Bitterness crept into Amelia's voice. "He made that very clear this morning. The wedding is supposed to be in 3 days." "Was supposed to be." "Then we need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere they won't find you." Isaac stood and looked at her directly. "You have anywhere you can go? Family elsewhere? Friends?" Amelia shook her head slowly. "My mother died when I was 12. I have an aunt in California, my mother's sister, but I haven't seen her in years. I don't even know if she would take me in." "California is a long way," Isaac said. "I know." Amelia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold she was in her wet dress. "I didn't plan this. I just ran. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore with them all talking about my wedding like I wasn't even there." Isaac pulled a blanket from the bunk and handed it to her. "Get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. There's a shirt and pants in that trunk over there. They'll be too big, but they're dry. I will wait outside while you change." He was as good as his word, stepping out into the rain that had diminished to a steady drizzle. Amelia changed quickly, her fingers fumbling with cold. The clothes were indeed too large, but they were warm and dry, and they were not a dress chosen by her father to make her look appealing to Edmund. She rolled up the sleeves and pant legs as best as she could and wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. When she called Isaac back in, he was carrying wood he had gathered from the covered pile outside. He added it to the fire and then pulled one of the chairs close to the stove for her. The gesture was so simple and so kind that Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she said, and the words encompassed so much more than just the chair. Isaac nodded and took the other seat. "We need to figure out what to do. They will search for you. Your father will probably get the law involved, claim you stole something or lost your mind." "Can he do that?" "He's your father. You're unmarried. Law tends to side with fathers in these situations." Isaac's expression was grim. "Plus, Crowley has money and influence. He will want you found." Amelia felt despair creeping back. "So I ran for nothing? They'll just drag me back." "I did not say that." Isaac leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "We need to figure out what to do. There are always options. They might not be easy options, but they exist." "Like what?" Well, Isaac seemed to be thinking carefully. "You could try to get to your aunt in California. That's outside Utah territory, and if she vouches for you, it would be harder for your father to claim you're a runaway. But it's a long journey, and you would need money and supplies." "I have nothing," Amelia admitted. "I ran with just what I was wearing." "I have some money saved," Isaac said slowly. "Not a lot, but enough to get you started, and I know people along the way who might help." Amelia stared at him. "Why would you do this? You don't know me. I'm a stranger who nearly ran into your horse in a storm." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire.
When he spoke, his voice was soft but steady. My sister was 16 when my father tried to marry her off to a man she didn't want. She begged him not to make her do it. He didn't listen. She hung herself 2 days before the wedding. The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. Amelia's hand went to her throat instinctively. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Her name was Mary. She was kind and she loved birds. She could whistle any bird call you could think of. Isaac's eyes were distant, seeing the past. I was 17 and working on a ranch 2 days' ride away. By the time I heard what had happened and got home, she was already in the ground. My father said she was too willful, that she should have done her duty. I left that day and never went back. Isaac, so when I saw you running, I saw Mary. I saw her fear and her desperation, and I thought maybe I could help you when I couldn't.
And your dreams. I promise to build a life with you, not for you. I promise to stand beside you, Amelia replied, her voice steady despite the tears. I promise to work hard for our future. I promise to love you with my whole heart, freely given. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed her gently, and Amelia felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They spent their wedding night in the boarding house room, and Isaac was patient and gentle, letting Amelia set the pace. She had been afraid after hearing stories of how some men treated their wives, but Isaac made her feel cherished and safe. He whispered how beautiful she was, how brave, how much he loved her. And when they came together, it felt like a promise being fulfilled, two people choosing each other completely. Afterward, lying in the narrow bed with Isaac's arms around her, Amelia felt peace settle into her bones. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For seeing me, for giving me your horse, for giving me a choice when no one else would." Isaac kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for choosing me, for trusting me, for being brave enough to run into that storm." They left Carson City 2 days later as Mr. and Mrs. Isaac Emerson, with legal papers proving their marriage. They bought supplies and a pack horse and began the long journey north to Wyoming. It was late summer now, and they needed to reach the valley and establish at least a basic shelter before winter came. The journey took weeks. They followed wagon trails when they could, struck out across open country when they could not. They saw herds of antelope and elk, mountain ranges that seemed to touch the sky, rivers that ran clear and cold. At night, they made camp and talked about their plans, growing more detailed with each passing day. "We will need to file a homestead claim," Isaac said. "Prove up the land by living on it and improving it." "How much land can we claim?" 160 acres to start. If we work it right, we can add more over time." Amelia tried to imagine that much space, all theirs. It seemed impossible and wonderful. What should be built first? Shelter for us, shelter for the animals, then we can worry about everything else. They reached the valley in mid-September as the aspen trees were just beginning to turn gold. It was everything Isaac had described and more. A clear stream ran through it and grass grew thick and green. The mountains rose up on 3 sides, providing shelter from the worst of the weather. There was timber for building and good soil for a garden. "It is perfect," Amelia breathed, and Isaac grinned at her. "It is home, our home." They filed their claim at the nearest land office, a 2-day ride away, and returned to begin building. The work was hard, harder than Amelia had ever worked in her life, but it was satisfying in a way nothing had ever been before. Every log they hauled, every nail they drove, every stone they placed was building their future with their own hands. Isaac taught her how to notch logs, how to chink mud between the cracks, how to build a roof that would shed snow. They worked from dawn until dark and fell into their bedrolls exhausted each night. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from meaningful work. By the time the first snows came, they had a small cabin with a stone fireplace, a lean-to for the horses, and supplies laid in for winter. It was not fancy, but it was solid and warm, and theirs. That first winter was hard but wonderful. Snowed in for weeks at a time, they had nothing but each other for company. They talked and planned and dreamed.
Isaac taught Amelia to play poker with dried beans for steaks. Amelia taught Isaac the poems her mother had taught her. They made love by firelight and fell asleep tangled together against the cold. In the spring, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She told Isaac one evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sunset. "I'm going to have a baby," she said quietly. Isaac went very still. Then he turned to her with wonder in his eyes. "Truly?" "Truly. Sometime in the fall, I think." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "Are you happy? Is this what you want?" The fact that he asked, that he still checked to make sure she was choosing this, made Amelia love him even more. "I am happy. I want this. I want our family." Their son was born in October as the leaves were falling. The birth was hard and there were moments when Amelia was afraid, but Isaac never left her side. And when it was over, she held their baby and felt overwhelming love surge through her. "What should we name him?" Isaac asked, his finger gently touching the baby's tiny hand. Amelia thought of her mother, who had fought to give her daughter a love of learning and independence despite the restrictions of their world. "What about Jonathan, after my mother's father? He was a good man, by all accounts, stood up for what he believed in." "Jonathan Emerson." Isaac tried it out, then smiled. "I like it. Welcome to the world, Jonathan." They spent that winter learning to be parents, taking turns walking the floor with a crying baby, marveling at every milestone. The cabin that had felt spacious now felt full of life and purpose. In the spring, a neighboring rancher rode over to introduce himself. His name was Thomas Wright, and he had a spread about 10 miles east. He was gruff but friendly, and he offered to help Isaac with the branding when the time came. "Not much out here in terms of neighbors," Thomas said. "Good to have folks you can count on when things get tough. Winters are hard, summers can be harder with drought and such. We need to look out for each other." Isaac agreed, and they shook on it. Over the next few years, that network of neighbors grew. More homesteaders came, drawn by the promise of land and freedom. Some failed and left. Others, like Isaac and Amelia, dug in and stayed. Amelia started a small garden that grew larger each year. She raised chickens and learned to make cheese. She tended the cattle alongside Isaac and proved herself as capable as any ranch hand. The neighbors respected her, this woman who could rope a steer and then deliver a neighbor's baby with equal competence. Word got around that the Emersons would give work to those who needed it. A few times, people showed up at their door with stories of running from something, needing a fresh start. If they were willing to work, Isaac and Amelia gave them a chance. Some stayed for a season and moved on. A few stayed longer and became part of the growing community. One summer, a young woman arrived with a black eye and no belongings. She reminded Amelia so much of herself that it hurt. Her name was Sarah, and she had run from a husband who beat her. Amelia gave her sanctuary and work, and when the husband came looking for her months later, Isaac ran him off with a shotgun and a warning never to return. "No one gets dragged back to the life they are running from," Isaac said firmly, "not while I'm here." Sarah eventually married a neighboring rancher, a gentleman who treated her with kindness, and she named her first daughter Amelia in honor of the woman who had saved her. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Jonathan grew into a sturdy boy who loved horses and could ride almost before he could walk. When he was 3, Amelia gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Rose. 2 years later, another son arrived, whom they named Daniel. The cabin grew too small, so they added rooms, expanding it into a proper ranch house with a wide porch and enough space for their growing family. They added a barn and corrals and pastures. The 160 acres became more as they bought additional land from homesteaders who gave up. Isaac's dream of his own ranch had become real, but more than that, it had become a home, a place where people were free to be themselves, where hard work was rewarded, where kindness mattered more than cruelty. On their 10th anniversary, they sat on that same porch where Amelia had told Isaac about Jonathan, watching their children play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. "You ever think about that night in the storm?" Amelia asked, leaning against Isaac's shoulder, "about how different things could have been." "I think about it sometimes," Isaac admitted, "about how close we both came to never meeting. about how one moment of choice changed everything. You saved me that night. We saved each other. Isaac kissed her temple. You gave me a reason to fight for my dreams. You showed me what real partnership looks like, and you gave me this. He gestured to the ranch, the children, the life they had built. I did not know I could be this happy. Amelia smiled, that same fierce smile from the storm all those years ago, now tempered with contentment and joy. I told you once that I wanted to wake up each day and decide for myself what to do with it. I get to do that now. And every day I choose this life. I choose you. And I choose you every day for the rest of my life. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their children's laughter drifted up from the yard. Jonathan was teaching Emma and Rose to rope a fence post, while Daniel toddled after them, determined to keep up with their older siblings. The horses nickered softly in the barn. Somewhere in the distance, cattle loaded peacefully. Amelia thought about the girl she had been, running through a storm with no plan except escape. She thought about the moment Isaac had pressed his reins into her hands and told her to ride fast. That single act of compassion had changed both of their lives in ways neither could have predicted. She had been running from captivity and found freedom. She had been running from loneliness and found love. She had been running from a life planned by others and found a life built by her own choices. And it all started with a cowboy who gave her his horse in a storm and believed she deserved a chance. Years later, when their children were grown and having children of their own, Jonathan asked them to tell the story of how they met. He had heard it before, but he never tired of it. Amelia and Isaac sat in their rocking chairs on the porch,